Okay, hello. Now we are going to the world's largest garage. World's biggest? I don't know. I don't know. We'll go to a garage sale.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Cut.
Let's go.
We'll jump and then like next time we'll jump again.
Yan, ate cutter. Kana, unsa man na siya? There's toys. Saan din mga memorabilia nila? Dili.
Bar.
Yeah.
Bar.
Wala pa may napilian. Oh, Lego, Dad. We're done and then we didn't get anything because it's nothing in there. Dad, what can you say?
I think they're in the library. Voila.
Wala. Pangit. Pangit is the world largest.
Are they inside here?
Yeah, they're in the library. They're in the library. So their library is, you can use this one. What are you playing, Bri? Brianna, what are you playing? What's that? Siya na isa ko niya.
Here we go. Nice.
And there's a pizza there.
There's pizza there, yeah.
So Brianna will get the pizza and then you guys will
Wait, the pizza here.
Yes.
Go forward.
Hi, we are in Citadel. Citadel? Citadel. We are in Citadel and then somebody is...
Na nag-sunbathe dito sa
Sunday.
Pwede tayo matuyo ka sa kanan. But you have to pay. Bayad siya papunta dito. 17 years old below. Free. Adult. How much? $11.
11.
And then seniors is...
Yeah.
For pag you will bring a car. Going there. May bayad na. Parking. So look at the view.
Bye, everybody.
This should be worth it.
Yeah, I think. Bye, Brie. Go to the Philippines.
Huh?
What to na sa Philippines?
Bri, ayaw na ito dito. Kay mababa na sa Okay, what's this? Daddy, I don't know rahat. Kaya ikuhan mo yan.
Shana, turn around.
Did it happen now?
No, of course not.
I am hurt.
I can hear the Irish music.
That's the map. Going to Citadel.
Okay.
We're going to entrance. This is the fortress during the war.
Oh, amazing.
Dili na, tama ko. Pwede na ito. Dili mo stop.
Again.
Dili na, tama. Dili na.
Oh my God, the top.
You can't see that.
Balik ROTC.
What?
Balik ROTC.
Oh no, they're done, God.
Tapos na Wow.
Yeah, it's done.
Okay.
Ano siguro yung oras na dahil? Ano yung tukuan? Yung schedule.
Yes, that's
Social
good.
studies.
That's great. So my best guess would be it's related to that. Also because you're about to get a tour from me, and I'm a pretty interesting person to listen to, as I was just joking with someone over here earlier, and I should know because I have to listen to myself all day. So, my name is Corporal Mayette, and I'm here representing a corporal in the 78th Highlanders, which was a Scottish regiment of the British military, stationed here in the Halifax Citadel from 1869 until 1871. That's a whole lot to remember though, and I know people here are on vacation, so if you prefer, you can also call me Jeff, that is my first name, or if you forget that, you can also call me Hey You, that's totally fine as well, I promise I won't be offended. The fort you're inside of today was built a very long time ago, as I will describe, and it was not built with modern safety standards in mind. So while you're here, please do watch your step. First of all, where we're standing right now is probably the flattest part of the Halifax Citadel. And if you cast your eyes towards the main gate, you'll actually see it's a bit of a downward gradient, so it's not actually all that flat. Now, ladies and gentlemen, the fort that we are inside of today is actually one of a series of Halifax Citadels, and as long as there's been a city of Halifax, which was founded in 1749, there's been some sort of defensive structure up here on the hill. The citadel that we are inside of today is the fourth such citadel to stand on top of this site, which was started in 1828 and finished 28 years later in 1856. It was built by the British military and used as a British military site from its completion in 1856 for 50 years up until 1906.
You made it.
Well, it was founded in 1741.
Oh, awesome. Bagpipes?
I want to touch briefly on the regiments we represent here at the Halifax Citadel. There are two primary regiments we represent here at the fort. The first, I myself, Private Arsenault, and anyone wearing a kilt is representing a member of the 78th Highlanders, which, as I said, Scottish regiment of the British military stationed here from 1869 until 1871. The folks wearing the red jackets, I'll talk a little bit more about that. That's also a member of the 78th Highlanders. They're just wearing a different mode of dress from us. And the 2nd Regiment we represent over there, if we cast our eyes towards the main gate right behind you, you'll see the gentleman who looks a little bit like a bellhop, though he is not a bellhop, so do not give him your luggage. They absolutely hate it when people do that. That is a gentleman representing a member of the 3rd Brigade of the Royal Artillery, the folks who are in charge of all of the big guns here at the Halifax Citadel, and we'll definitely talk more. Now, this rifle that we're going to be seeing fired in just a few moments it actually started out its life as a muzzle-loading musket. They were widespread, but not necessarily perfectly effective. And they suffered from 2 major drawbacks. The first drawback, as we've already described, was the incredibly long reload time. They took almost 45 seconds to load, and that was if you were experienced. It probably took a little bit longer than that. Instead of every 45 seconds, possibly as quick as 6 seconds if you're as good at this job as I am, which is pretty incredible. Now, the other major, not to talk myself up for it, the other major improvement this weapon has that makes it a lot better is the rifling, which is spiral grooves that go down the barrel, which make it relatively indistinguishable from a modern firearm. Now, it is less grooves than a modern firearm, but they serve a similar purpose in that they make the bullets way more accurate. Here in 1869, we're in a transitional period. So we have advanced weaponry, but we're still using those outdated tactics, as many other militaries were using around this time period. For you folks, however, you will be absolutely fine where you're standing. However, if you do not like loud noises, the best time to plug your ears is when Private Arsenault raises the rifle up to his shoulder. However, that's also the best time to snag a photo. So if you can do both at the same time, you'll be quite impressed. Now, folks, come right on up to the rope so you have the best view.
Rifle fire demonstration will be right over here on South Parade. Right now!
Wall.
Round of applause, folks. Highlight about the Snyder Enfield. First of all, one last interesting fact about the rifle. They are all actually historic pieces. The only thing about the rifle that is not an original is the leather strap that you can see on the front, but everything else, right down to the individual metal fittings, is 100% a piece of history. Yeah, please go ahead and sit down. Don't be shy. We'll be outside for the rest of the tour pretty much, so we'll take a brief respite in here so you can breathe and breathe easy. Alright, so as the last couple folks sort of make their way inside, I'm going to get started. So here we are on our second stop on our tour of the Halifax Citadel, their guard room. And this is one of my favorite stops to bring folks to, specifically because when you visit here in the Halifax Citadel and you come to the guard room, you're actually carrying on a very, very long historical tradition. Folks like yourselves, citizens of the city of Halifax, visitors to the city of Halifax, could come up and visit the Halifax Citadel. They would come up and be stopped by the sentry at the front gate, and as long as they were properly dressed, more or less just as long as you looked nice, you could come inside, you'd sign your name in the guest book, and you'd be shown around the fort by an off-duty soldier like me. So what you folks are doing today is carrying on a very long historical tradition, which I think is really, really neat. In fact, the Halifax Citadel has never actually been attacked, which, I like to say, means that we have a 100% victory rate. You've won 100% of the battles you haven't fought yet. Now, this room that we are inside right now, the guard room, serves a couple of other purposes, but the main one that I want to highlight is what it is named for, which is the guard room, which is the area where the off-duty sentries were coming to take their breaks. So if you walked in by the front gate today, you would have seen the sentry standing with the red jacket and the feather bonnet standing very still. And our sentries stand today for an hour, and then they come in here for a 2-hour break, and they operate sort of on that cycle, 1 hour on, 2 hours off, from 9 a.m. in the morning until 5 p.m. in the evening. So they do that all day long. You stand 3 times a day, typically, on a normal day. And this that you folks are sitting on over here, and you folks are sitting over there, is what they gave the sentries to sleep on. This, folks, is a daybed, and that is exactly how it would have looked historically. No blanket, no pillow, no pillows. And you're probably thinking, doesn't that seem awfully uncomfortable? It absolutely does, but the reason for it is because the sentries were on call. right? They had to be ready to defend the Citadel at any given moment. So, rather than give them really comfortable beds so they could sleep really deeply, they gave them more stuff that you would nap on, right? A little bit sort of like you could doze, but not really get into any sort of seriously deep sleep. The uniform of the sentries, which we saw was the red jacket and big feather bonnet. So, as I was saying earlier, they're not representing a different regiment, they're just a different mode of dress. So what I'm wearing here today, folks, this is my casual uniform. This jacket, my buff jacket, is a single layer of undyed wool, so it's actually relatively light compared to the sentry's wool doublet, which is 2 layers of red wool, right? And that red dye is really, it was harder to manufacture back in the day than it is now. They're also wearing rather elaborate feather bonnets. So that red uniform, that sort of full marching order as it's called, was meant to be worn when you were doing something that was probably going to kill you, something really deadly. So whether you were marching in a battle, or standing sentry, or getting married, you wanted to wear your full marching order. Yeah, you got the joke. Because the British Empire always said, if you were going to die, you may as well dress your best, right? That was kind of the logic anyway, back then. Nowadays, of course, we see it much different.
That's real.
Area of the Halifax Citadel, and I brought you over here because I want to talk about one of the most important substances to the British Empire in our time period, which is black powder. Black powder is the primary propellant for all of our weapons in this time period. So if you think about how a cannon works, or how the Snyder Enfield works, you put black powder in, you put a projectile on top of that black powder, and when it explodes, all the black powder that is, the explosive force propels the shell outward as the explosive force follows the path of least resistance out of the cannon, right out of the muzzle. That's kind of the idea. So by that logic, with about 450 soldiers stationed in the Citadel and cannons all along the wall, as you can see, the idea would be they'd need a lot of black powder at any one time. And in this building behind me, they would store half of the black powder reserves for the Halifax Citadel, about 250,000 pounds, give or take. So about 250,000 pounds of explosives at any one time. Now by that logic, you have to keep this black powder very secure, which is why, historically, there were actually several sentry posts in the Halifax Citadel. You might have known we posted one at the front gate when you walked in, but what you may not have known is that we posted another one here in front of the South Black Powder Magazine, and another one in front of the North Black Powder Magazine on the other side of the Halifax Citadel. Now the sentry is there to make sure that anyone who goes into the Halifax Citadel, or the Black Powder Magazine rather, actually has a very good reason to do so. But the sentry was also there to make sure that anyone who went in was properly dressed. Now, by properly dressed, I don't mean wearing a really nice hat or like a fashionable kilt like mine. I, of course, mean properly dressed in the sense that you're not an active, walking fire hazard, ladies and gentlemen. If you look at my uniform right now, you'll notice it's absolutely coated in metal. Brass on my hat, on my jacket, on my belt, on my sporran. I've got this metal bayonet back here. And if I were wearing historic boots, I'd have nails pounded into the soles of my boots to help provide for additional traction. So if I were walking through the Black Powder Magazine and I were to say, trip and fall and create a spark, kaboom, the whole building goes up, we lose half of our black powder reserves, a really nice retaining wall, and me, all of which are very, very bad things, of course. So instead, you'd have to wear a special uniform, a jacket with wooden buttons, and special felt slippers to make sure that you can't create a spark, or that if you do, you must have been making a serious, serious effort.
What is that little, looks like the smokestack of
Yes,
wheels?
absolutely, yeah. So that smokestack with the wheel, in the earlier days when most ships were made out of wood, rather in the 1860s where they're made out of some wood and some metal, it was really, really useful if you were to actually heat cannonballs up, because they were much more effective at punching through ships. Yeah, and setting the ship on fire as well. So what you would do is you would roll this furnace around and you would heat up cannonballs until great quarry still out if you drive out towards Citadel. There's a large granite quarry out there, and that is where all of the granite came from. It actually didn't come from all that far away. It was all locally sourced. That's kind of the idea. Much simpler than, of course, bringing it over some sort of mountain. Yeah, but it was, of course, all hand cut, and all it was excellent masonry work, as we can all tell. Now, one thing that I do want to talk about while we're up here on the western wall of the Halifax Citadel is that where we are standing right now is actually the front of the fort. I know that seems kind of strange because right now the Halifax Harbor is at your backs. However, this is actually the front of the fort, and the reason for that is because the Halifax Citadel, back in the day, was actually just one part of what was then known as the Halifax Defense Complex. It was a series of forts and gun batteries and minefields, all of which were designed to prevent any ships from reaching the city of Halifax, right? Those were all very effective defenses. However, their major flaw was that they were all pointed out towards the Atlantic Ocean, and none of them were pointed this direction behind towards the west. So that is why they always had a fort on top of this hill. Not to defend against ships necessarily, but rather to defend against any sort of potential land invasion that could come from behind me here from the western direction. Another good way to think about it is that historically, this western approach was all just one big expanse of land known as the Halifax Common. Whereas the area behind you here, towards the Halifax Harbor, has always been the city of Halifax. And if the Citadel were ever to try and fire at a ship in the harbor, you would actually be firing sometimes over and sometimes through the city of Halifax, which I'm sure is not a great way to enamor yourselves to the citizens of the city.
Mama nagtatarawan.
Marching to war.
I'm trying my balance.
Pretty Titanic there.
All one here behind me was a commercial telegraph used for communicating with the citizens of Halifax to let them know which merchant groups were coming in and where they were coming from. So any merchant who had the code book, which was widely available, could look up at this mast any time of the day and know exactly which trade group was coming in and where they were coming from. Of course, the military telegraph was coded, and because that was just intended for military signals. Now these two masts solved that communication problem overnight, right? Absolutely solved it perfectly. And the British Empire loved this problem, loved the solution so much that they decided, why not just establish a line of masts across the entirety of Canada? Make it easy to communicate across the territories super easily. So they actually started establishing a line of masts. And they planned to go all the way to Upper and Lower Canada, right, Ontario, but they only got as far as Fredericton, New Brunswick, before a little thing called the electric telegraph came out, which made these two masts completely obsolete. But again, that kind of highlights the Halifax Citadel's really transitional time period, right? We're sitting here in 1869 to 1871. The electric telegraph was invented just around that time period, so we're just getting towards that. Now, despite the electric telegraph coming out and making these obsolete, they did keep these masts here as backup, right up until the early 1900s. But also because this is an excellent time to talk about one of my favorite things here at the Halifax Citadel, which is this cannon right here. This is one of our most famous artifacts here in the fort. This is the noon gun. This is the cannon that we've been firing every day since 1856, possibly earlier, to let the city of Halifax know, as violently as possible, that it's time to take their lunch break. And this is a tradition that we still continue to carry on right up until today. If you find yourself in the city of Halifax around noontime, you're almost certainly going to hear it. And we do this every single day of the year, except Christmas Day. It's really hard to find people who want to work on Christmas. But every year, between December 26th, all spring, summer, fall, and winter, right up until December 24th, we are here firing this cannon. So the next time you're sitting at home and you're thinking, gosh, I wonder what the weather's like in Halifax, and you look it up, and it's a record-breaking snowstorm, 20 feet of snow, buses canceled, schools canceled, work's canceled, nobody's going anywhere, you just remember, your buddy Corporal Mayan standing right here, and I'm shoveling out this cannon, digging it out, just to make sure it gets fired on time. Why is that, you ask? Because I can't stand it when people sleep in past 12 o'clock. No, I'm kidding. In reality, it's a really important tradition, and one that we are very, very proud to be able to carry on here at Halifax. One with incredibly humble origins, really. Because in 1860, watches were really expensive and difficult to procure. So, the British Empire decided to establish a system to let all the citizens, but especially the soldiers, know what time it was. So they took this old cannon, which was no longer useful, pointed it out over the city, and began firing it at strategic times of the day to let people know what time it is, whether they want to or not. And we're really glad to be able to do that today, not only because it's really, really cool, it's the longest standing black powder tradition in North America, but also because it's really fun to scare people sometimes. But it is a really, really cool tradition. If you're ever here around noon, I'd highly recommend